Hi, I'm Anushka and I am from the SCAS Health and Wellbeing team, and today I'm here to speak to Mark.
And my name's Mark Pringle. I'm an ambulance technician working out of Milton Keynes Blue Light Hub.
And today Mark and I are going to be discussing a lived experience of burnout. So Mark, the first question I have for you today is, what would you say that burnout is? How would you explain that?
So I believe that burnout in our sense is an emotional response to this feeling of being chronically overworked. From my own experience, I think I didn't recognise how much pressure was being put on me from an organisational point of view, but also how much pressure I was putting on myself to try and deal with everything myself. And it took me a very long time to realise that things were getting on top of me.
And so you would say that burning out is when you get to that point of excessive overworking and not being able to balance that with your personal life?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So Mark, how did you realise when you had reached the point of burnout?
So it was my wife that I think first planted the seed. My wife's a team leader here at Milton Keynes, and she'd realised that the work was getting on top of me and I was coming home more stressed, and I was taking it out on her, our children sometimes. I never felt like it had got to the point that I couldn't come to work, but I was starting to become aware that I was finding it harder to come to work. I did one particular job where I lost my composure and sort of took it out on a patient, and that was the light bulb moment where I realised I had to get some help. I was lucky enough to speak to my GP at that point, but at the time I genuinely thought it was just stress and anxiety due to the workload during COVID in particular. And then randomly I'd seen a YouTube video that was on Facebook, and it was an Australian paramedic talking about his experience of burnout, and everything he said just made perfect sense. And that was the point where I could, it was like I could see everything in writing. I could completely engage with everything they were describing at that point.
And you related to that, and that's when you reached the point of...
Yeah, and I think that was the difference between me feeling just that it was just stress or anxiety or depression maybe, but actually there was something really bespoke to how I was feeling, not just a general overriding feeling.
So were there any particular signs and symptoms that you experienced in that period leading up to you burning out?
So this was, the point all this happened, I guess, was during COVID, and with time I've sort of lost exactly where it was in this. But I was aware that there was a big demand on our service. We were getting more and more calls, and I felt almost like I single-handedly wanted to solve the problem. So I was making my job cycle time quicker because I felt there was jobs outstanding that needed my time, and it was this feeling that I had a bit more to give and I could give more. So if I just worked faster, if I just worked quicker, I would see more patients and things would get better. The knock-on effect of that was this feeling of coming home exhausted at the end of every day, almost like not wanting to come to work, but feeling like it was my duty to come to work. It was my duty to attend these calls as quick as possible. So there was this real sort of dissonance, I guess, of what I wanted to do, which was slow down a bit, and this feeling that I could give more and I should try and give more if I had that in me.
Right. And was there any physical symptoms that you were starting to experience?
Not particularly. I've worked in the ambulance service a long time, so like I've always had a healthy sleep cycle, despite the fact we work night shifts and day shifts. But looking at people now, I think sleep is one of the factors that starts to be a symptom, I guess,
Yeah.
of early burnout, and this awkwardness of coming into work. You know, this not a fear of coming to work, but finding it more difficult to come to work and give your time up.
It's very interesting you talk about the sleep, because there's a lot of research and a lot of people talking about sleep at the moment in all fields. So I think it's starting to become something people are more aware of. You know, you're not going to function very well if you're not sleeping properly. So
yeah, absolutely.
And how did you navigate yourself through this period in your life? Did you seek support from friends and family, or did you just try and do it alone?
So I was lucky to have my wife on my side. As I say, she's in the ambulance service, and she was the person, I guess, that really started the ball rolling with me trying to get some help. She advised me to contact my doctor, which I'd done. I had contacted a counsellor or therapist through the health and wellbeing programs that we had within SCAS, and around the same time there was a colleague who worked with us who had just trained to become a life coach, and it was sort of like a combination of all them three things really. I had loads of support at home from my family. Colleagues, I didn't really want to put any pressure on them. I sort of felt like I didn't want to involve them and make it worse for them, which I think is a very ambulance-y thing to do. So I tried to keep them out of it, but my team leader, Jen Hall, she was really helpful. She sort of get me some focus over the sort of things that were making it difficult for me at work. She was able to sort of help me understand some coping mechanisms. The downside, I guess, at the time was, you know, the counsellor that was assigned to me, because it was COVID, everything was done remotely, and I always feel that there is a less of a connection when you're talking to a stranger just over a phone or over a Zoom call. So that was not as helpful, but that was, you know, down to the times we were going through. You know, it was different for all of us and difficult for all of us. It was the coaching was the glue, I think, that held everything together. You know, like I say, it did have support from work managers and from the health and wellbeing department, but it was the coaching concept that helped me realise where my problem was, because I think at the time I was putting all the blame on other people and other things. It was COVID, it was workload, it was control, it was 111. You know, I blamed all these things for how I was feeling. And it was the coaching that sort of enabled me to get more focus over why I was allowing them things to get to me.
And what did your road to recovery look like?
So initially, really slow. I'd started taking the medication that my doctor had prescribed for me, which was definitely helping me get some balance. But at the time, I didn't feel comfortable with taking medication. It's not something that I enjoyed doing, and actually it sort of made me feel a bit numb inside. So it was great that I didn't have these feelings of anxiety about coming to work, but equally I wasn't getting the enjoyment from coming to work that I'd previously had as well. The coaching continued on a really casual basis. As I say, it was a colleague of ours at the time who had done his training, and we were sort of like almost like chipping away at the edges of the problems. And that went on for quite a while, and I suppose I was had a bit of a victim mentality. I was still thinking, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but you know, controller giving us more jobs, so I can see what you're saying. However, you know, there is a high demand on us because of COVID. So it really took a while, and then after, well, I know I stopped taking medication 2 months after starting them, and my wife at the time was concerned it was too early, and she thought it was the medication that was perhaps helping me. And then suddenly I started having the satisfaction about coming back to work again, and then I was piecing the satisfaction I was getting from being back at work again with the coaching, and then I started talking more about coaching to colleagues and passing on how I felt about work and how had this sort of transition from blaming other people for how I was feeling to taking responsibility over how I was feeling. I felt more empathetic with patients. I felt like I had more time. I stopped trying to chase my tail, which I think was a big thing at the time, where previously I'd seen all these jobs on Stack or heard these jobs on Stack, thinking I need to do that, I need to do that. Starting to look at the bigger picture, you know, that there are other ambulances out there. So then I stopped trying to take on the world, and then slowing down my own sort of speed of thought. And then when you start slowing your own speed of thought, suddenly the problems that I'd seen previously don't seem to jump up on you.
Yeah.
You know, so like if I have a shift change, it's not, oh, this is a disaster, I've got a change of shift and I wasn't expecting to go to Aylesbury, or I wasn't expecting to do this. You go, okay, you know, what's really the problem with going to Aylesbury?
It sounds like your expectations shifted, or the way you managed your expectations, and also you built that resilience in yourself, and that's how you sort of got yourself back into work and thinking differently. So yeah, that's amazing.
Most definitely.
Do you think you'd be able to recognise those signs and symptoms again should you find yourself edging towards burning out?
I've thought about this for a long time, because I mean, the reality is that the job I do now is no different to how it was prior to me burning out. So it is something that does concern me. I think I would, on the basis that I have started to be more aware of how I'm feeling, and I sort of check in on myself more frequently, and try and focus about like how am I feeling today. One of the tools I guess I had when I was going through coaching is this concept of a wheel of life, and essentially it's a circle that's separated into how you're going to spend your time, and then it's a rolling scale of 1 to 10. So you might have friends on there as one, family on another, your career, your money, your personal life, and you can label the categories however you like. And then sort of every now and again I just go through that and score where I am on that particular day. And because it is a spontaneous thing, it will change from day to day, probably hour to hour. But if I can do that, I can identify what things are taking up my time,
right,
and what things I'm neglecting. So it might be that I've been out with friends quite a lot, but I've not seen my parents, so I'm aware to spend some time with them. Or it might be I've done lots of shifts at work, but because that my money's better, you know, maybe I take some time out and do something with that money. So I think I'd recognise it now, but it's a constant effort to keep an eye and be self-reflective over how I'm feeling.
Do you now watch for signs in other people that you, just to make sure that you know you're keeping that lookout to see if anyone else is reaching that point?
I do, yeah. I think I'm quite lucky in the job I do at the moment. You know, predominantly I work with a team of say 20, 30 people, of which half of them are a different skill grade to me. So I'm only working with maybe 15 people for 90% of my shifts. And you know, I'm lucky that we've got a really good team. We know each other's lifestyles and our families. And yeah, I do look out for work colleagues. Sometimes it's difficult because I think our job is stressful at times. You know, we get sometimes anxious about our career paths, or we get sort of maybe a bit down if we've done lots of night shifts, maybe we're tired, we're not sleeping well. So it's interesting to look out for other people, but without being too judgmental over what might be going on. No matter who I'm working with, I always like to ask about sleep, and as we talked about earlier, sleep is very important to our well-being. And I also think that if you are feeling anxious, if you are feeling burnt out, I think sleep is probably one of the first things that may go. So I like to ask how people are sleeping, and then if they've had a bad night's sleep, you know, it's just, is that normal for you? Is that a one-off? Because it's a nice way of having a conversation and sort of getting a feel for the crewmate that you're with at the time.
Mark, how are you doing now?
Really good. Yeah, it was a wake-up call for me. I think going through burnout or breakdown or whatever you want to call it, I reduced my hours to start with. I was lucky enough that my wife supported me to reduce my hours at the time. I went down to exactly part-time really, and that was really helpful, spending more time with my children, being at home more of the time, and just getting that better work-life balance for me. I trained to become a coach, so I had started getting more of the tools that were taught to me, and sort of being able to offer that support to other people, and getting back to learning. And I think it's a strange one for me, but like I joined the ambulance service on the road in 2001, and that was the last time I'd done any sort of training. Like, I don't particularly read, I never pushed outside my comfort zone. So training to become a coach was the start. I've done a simple psychology course.
Wow.
I support staff on station, support the health and wellbeing team as a champion, and I think I'm just in a really good place. And work-life balance, I think, if I could put it down to one thing, it's definitely getting that better work-life balance, and understanding that, or getting back, I guess, to being able to go home and switch off, and try not to look at my emails or try not to think about what's upcoming.
Yeah. And that is, you've covered 2 of the 5 ways to wellbeing there by always learning. So you've experienced that, and it does help, doesn't it, to get your mind working on something different, and also you're volunteering and you're helping out with others. So they're 2 great ways to look at yourself holistically. So if there's one piece of advice you could share with our colleagues that you think is important to prevent them burning out, what would that be?
I think the key thing for staff within SCADS is to check in with yourself, to try and understand how you're feeling, and try and be more aware of shifts in how you're feeling. Maybe if you're coming to the end of a set of shifts and you're in EOC or you're on the road, is try and review maybe your week's work, but learning to reset, sign in with yourself, work out where you need to spend some time. Is it you want to spend some time with your family or your friends, or do you want to spend some time by yourself and get some fresh air? Do you feel like you need company and you want to sort of share how you feel with other people? Looking back at this sort of journey that I've been on, I think a big part of how I feel now is being down to the fact that I'm able to see where I'm not spending time, or where I have been overly focused, and trying to keep that balance. The one real key point, I guess, of this wheel of life is that when it's balanced, it rolls really well, and there is balance in your life. And quite often we're not completely balanced, but if you can look at your life and work out where you need to spend time, you realise that actually, if I can sacrifice earning a bit of money to spend some time with family, that will get more balanced, it flows a lot easier. So checking in with yourself and being capable of having the resilience to sort of change course slightly, so that it doesn't get out of control.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Mark, for sharing this time with us, and it's really glad to see you back and thriving. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.